Emperor!
Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals to this video here today, where we throw a handful of nerdy contestants at Warhammer 40k and see how it goes. Like with the others, this is not simply a can they beat or versus style of video. It's not a death battle. It's going to be a bit more introspective and examine how these characters would interact with the grander Warhammer anthology, while also pairing them against a foe of similar strength to give us a baseline to compare them against. So, we're back again. If this is your first video in the series, be sure to check out the two previous entries of just throwing random factions or characters at Warhammer 40k, or the playlist up here in the corner if you want to check out all of the multiversal crossovers we've covered on the channel. And for everything else, there will be spoilers for various shows or games in this video. If you're worried, here's your warning. But without further ado, let's just jump right into this. Alright, kicking things off, we have the Attack Titan himself, Eren Yeager, stepping up to face one of the Imperium's colossal war machines, an Imperial Knight. On one side, we've got a guy with a serious grudge and the power to transform into a devastating giant who can reshape his own flesh. And on the other, we have a towering armored knight that's got enough firepower to level city blocks with a single salvo. So let's see if the Titan powers are enough to punch through ceramite and plasteel, or if he's about to get squashed like a bug under the heel of the knight's armor. The Attack Titan, Eren Yeager, comes from a world constantly besieged by giant, flesh-eating titans. He has the power to transform into a titan himself, a towering humanoid with incredible strength, speed, and regeneration. Eren isn't just any titan, he's inherited multiple titan abilities, including the Founding Titan's power to control others, and the Warhammer Titan's ability to create and deploy impressive structures. Eren's journey has turned him from a hopeful soldier into a fearsome force of nature, willing to do whatever it takes to protect his people and bring about his vision of freedom, literally no matter the cost. Now, there's a few different scenarios I thought about putting into here. Do we take Eren at the end of the series with an uncountable number of wall titans against a small army of Imperial Knights and Titans? Or do we pair him up with allies like Levi or Mikasa Ackerman? Do we buff him up with the powers of all 9 Titan forms? For today, we will not. Today, it's just Eren and his abilities just before he merged with the Founder and began the rumbling. The Attack Titan and the Warhammer Titan within his grasp against a singular Knight Paladin, so they can get up close and personal. Speaking of, on the other side we have the Imperial Knights of Warhammer 40k. Towering over the battlefield at 40 feet tall, these mechanized suits of armor are piloted by noble warriors, known as Knights. With an arsenal that includes massive chainswords, thermal cannons, and missile pods, these war machines are literal walking tanks. Each knight is a relic, cherished and maintained over centuries, and driven by a noble bloodline sworn to protect the Imperium of Man, or just humanity in general. Against the relentless fury of the Attack Titan, the Imperial Knight stands as a symbol of humanity's power and control against the rampant chaos and anarchy brought about by Yeager. Now, right away, I can probably go the Chaos Prime route and point out that Eren is just bloodthirsty and ambitious enough that his hatred in the universe of 40k would draw corn to him like a cigarette at a gas station. But we're going to be pairing these two against each other one-on-one. And I'm going to be honest, this fight only goes one round. Eren has an incredible amount of endurance, especially compared to other titans, with the exception of the Cart Titan. But he still has a limit. We see him transform up to 3 times in a single fight to reposition and attack the Warhammer Titan, but the second he's on foot and doesn't have a fleshy mech suit to defend himself, Eren is just like any other human against a knight. Even with ODM gear, against the plasteel shell of the knight, it's probably not even going to help him latch on. Like with the Armored Titan, the gear would probably just be deflected off of the armor. So the best chance Eren would have is to try and leverage his mobility, speed, and martial arts over the knight, as a single slash from the Reaper chainsword could break the Titan in half. The cannons would rip apart the flesh like a legion of thunder spears coming down on him all at once. The only chance Eren could have is closing the distance and trying to rip apart the Knight, which might just be possible. Now, Knights are protected from projectiles by ion shields, but unlike the void shields used by gigantic titans of the Imperium that block all incoming damage, the ion shield of a Knight simply slows incoming damage down so that it is less effective against their hull. And even more so, the shield only covers directly in front of the Knight, meaning that if he was fast enough, Eren could be ripping into the Titan like a humanoid version of a Tyranid Bio-Titan. But there's one more thing we can look at to compare the strength of these hulking monsters. The size and weight of the boulder lifted by Eren in Trost. That legendary scene where he lifts the stone to plug the hole in the wall? We never got a good sense of the strength of the Titans, especially as they only ever fight other Titans, which is a bad reference point for our feeble human brains, but you know what we do understand? Rocks. So even though I don't like using science and math in these videos, as I think the really pencil-pushing side of power scalers does a lot to make things less entertaining, that's exactly what we're going to do here. So let's look at that boulder, compared to Eren's Titan. Thankfully, nerds on the internet have already put this question to the grindstone, so I'm going to be running with that here. If we take into account the rock's density and the size given to us by Redditor aerobic respiration, we get a total rock weight of 7,000 tons, or roughly 15 Boeing 747s. Now, why is this important? Well, because an Imperial Knight weighs much less than 15 Boeings. Actually, we don't know exactly how much they weigh because according to James' workshop, a Warhound Titan, which is substantially larger, only weighs 400 tons. Now, if we compare it to machines of war in the real world, take an M1 Abrams and just imagine 4 of them stacked on top of each other to equal roughly 40 feet tall. At about 70 tons a pop, we're getting a Knight that weighs around 280 tons. Not actually that far off from the Warhound being roughly twice as tall. And with that, I think the fight comes down to luck in the first draw. If the Knight is capable of gunning down Eren several times over before he can even reach the machine, the Knight is walking out with the win. If Eren can get close enough to get his hands on the Knight, he might not be able to penetrate the hull, but could definitely be capable of ripping apart the limbs, if not simply lifting and heaving the mechanical suit until it is made inoperable. And while the boulder at Trost may have zapped all of Eren's strength at the time, first, he was much more of a novice, and second, that boulder weighs roughly 25 times more than this Imperial Knight, meaning Eren would have enough strength to toss it around like a toy. Now against multiple targets or at extreme range, Eren gets turned into Swiss cheese. But against a singular Knight, there's chance enough for the anime nonsense to kick in. But see, now my biggest question to you is, what do you think a new Beast Titan looks like in the universe of Warhammer? As it seemingly changes to reflect a multitude of different animals, I've actually been sitting here thinking, what would that look like? Is it going to be a Kroot? Is it going to be an Orc? Is it going to be a Tyranid? Let me know what you think down below. Ah yes, the ultimate clash of claws and heresy. Today, we're setting up a battle between the savage and the sinister. Wolverine versus the Knight Haunter himself, the Primarch Konrad Curze. And while Logan may be known for his ferocity and unbreakable adamantium skeleton, Konrad Curze embodies the terror of the Imperium's darkest chapter, wielding cruelty as a blade. The ultimate question here: can Wolverine's healing factor and brutal resilience endure the merciless onslaught of the Knight Haunter, or will the terror tactics of the Twisted Primarch overwhelm even the Wolverine's boundless tenacity? On one side, we have Wolverine, the Weapon X experiment gone rogue. Logan's mutant abilities include heightened senses, claws that can slice through steel, and a healing factor that makes him nearly unkillable. His life has been a constant battle against his own nature, the world, and even forces that created him. Trained in countless combat techniques and possessing a rage that can border on berserker, Wolverine is a fighter who can endure unimaginable punishment and keep coming back for more. But will that be enough to face down a demigod? Because on the other hand, we have Konrad Curze, the infamous Knight Haunter, Primarch of the Night Lord's Legion. Born on the nightmare world of Nostromo, Conrad Kurz grew into a master of psychological warfare and terror tactics. His power claws are extensions of his own lethal prowess, allowing him to disembowel foes with surgical precision. As a Primarch, Kurz possesses superhuman strength, reflexes, and almost prophetic ability to anticipate his enemy's moves. But what makes him truly terrifying is his willingness to descend into absolute cruelty, weaponizing fear as much as his claws. Now, this is an interesting matchup for me, because on one hand you have Vladimir Warcrime wielding adamantium power claws, something that is supposed to allow the user to cut through practically anything, with exception to other adamantium weapons like additional power weapons or the toothed blades of Astartes chainswords and chain axes, which is much the same for Wolverine, whose metal claws couldn't cut through adamantium either without being superheated first. But these are also two people that are very hard to kill. Kurz may not be a perpetual like his brother Vulcan or the Emperor, but he's still a Primarch, and a damn good one at that. While he may not be the top rung of fighters among the 20 Primarchs, he's still a contender, going toe-to-toe with the likes of Angron, Korvax, and even the Lion. So much so that when he returned in his old age, Lionel Johnson admits that Kurz would probably lay him out. But of course, Logan is no slouch either. Anyone who can go more than 5 minutes in the ring against the Hulk is a pretty nasty fighter to begin with. Apart from his adamantium skeleton keeping Kurz from breaking Wolverine entirely, Logan is basically an orc. Nothing short of atomizing his body will keep him down forever. Or you could just drown him. But on top of that, Logan's adamantium isn't permanent. If he gets blasted by Kurz and loses an arm, that appendage is coming back without the metal grafted onto his bones. Now, with just his regular skeleton, Wolverine is much less dangerous in one way, being unable to cut through almost anything and no longer punching with steel behind his fist, but it does make him substantially faster and better at regenerating. Would he be able to grow his limbs fast enough though to keep up with someone like Kurz? Probably not. If Conrad captured Wolverine and tried to torture him, taking him apart limb by limb, he may be turning Logan into an even greater threat. But that's assuming he gets got in the first place. It's a hard one for me to come to the conclusion on. On one hand, Kurz with the lightning claws is already pretty much Wolverine, but taller and wrapped in a suit of armor stronger than a tank. But he doesn't have the healing ability, where Logan can get stabbed, shot, and lacerated time and time again. One good claw to the face is all it's gonna take to bring down the Night Haunter. So I hand it off to you, the audience. Do you think Logan would have enough martial prowess and tactical know-how to one-up Kurz in a duel? Or do you think he's outmatched by his grimdark vampire duplicate? Let me know in the comments below. Now it's time for a battle of the dwarves. On one side, we've got the grizzled miners from Deep Rock Galactic, rocking their pickaxes, drills, and high-powered mining lasers. And on the other, we have the League of Votann, Warhammer's very own space dwarves. It's Rock and Stone versus the Ironkin. They've both got tech, the attitude, and even the beard power. So which group of stout warriors is going to dig their way to victory? Now, the dwarves from Deep Rock Galactic are miners first and warriors second, but don't underestimate them either. They're a tight-knit team of rugged, beer-loving miners who delve into dangerous caves for valuable resources. With flamethrowers, miniguns, drills, and all manner of high-tech mining gear, they're more than capable of holding their own against all sorts of alien creatures. Their battle cry, Rock and Stone, echoes through every cavern, reminding them to stick together and fight for each other, even when the odds look impossible. And then the League of Votann, also known as the Kin, are a highly advanced race of space dwarves in Warhammer 40,000. They are technologically savvy, boasting sophisticated weaponry and resilient power armor. The Kin are loyal, pragmatic, and operate under the guidance of ancient artificial intelligences called the Votann. Unlike the Deep Rock dwarves, these guys aren't just here to mine for resources, they're here to claim their place in the galaxy and ensure the survival of their species. armed with high-caliber weapons and a determination as tough as bedrock. This gives us a clash of two stout, unyielding forces who know what it means to dig deep and fight hard. Now, of course, like with many things, Warhammer outscales Deep Rock almost immediately. The kin are effectively infinite when compared to the 80-some mining rigs of the DRG Corporation, most of which aren't even run exclusively by dwarves. So in all likelihood, the DRG would have to settle with "we're rich" and join the ranks with the Votann, or they'd be a very short obstacle in the way of Warhammer squats. On a tech level, they have similarly powered weapons, armor, and more, but like always, the Votann have countless legions of soldiers who will just keep on pushing. Kinda anticlimactic, I know, I just wanted to get the space dwarves in here. Votann never really get a chance to show up in the Warhammer videos. If there's anyone out there you think would be interesting to pair up with the kin, let me know down below. And finally, let's wrap things up with an infestation to end all infestations. The Flood from Halo invading the Warhammer universe. These guys aren't your run-of-the-mill zombies. They're a parasitic nightmare that can consume entire civilizations. So, how do the forces of Warhammer fare against an enemy that can assimilate anything organic in its path? From the Tyranids to Chaos to even the Mechanicus, Warhammer has its share of horrors, but can they hold the line against another foe that's all about relentless, mindless expansion? The Flood from the Halo universe is a parasitic lifeform that can consume, infect, and assimilate any biological life it encounters. They're driven by an insatiable hunger to absorb all life, and their spread is devastating. Once they infect a host, they control its body and its mind, transforming it into a horrifying weapon. As they consume more, they grow smarter and stronger, becoming a relentless plague that threatens entire galaxies. They're the ultimate survival threat, a disease that thinks, plans, and evolves. But that's not all. The Flood are actually remnants of the Precursors, a race of alien beings millions of years old who had laid the seeds for their galactic heirs like humanity and the Forerunners. The Flood itself is unstoppable, so much so that the Forerunners created the Halo Rings, which sterilize the universe just to combat them. But they also are here to test the species of the galaxy. For a race to be understanding, strong, and know when to interject themselves so that life in the universe can flourish. For a species to be worthy of the mantle. But any intelligent gravemind can see clearly that no race in the Warhammer universe is worthy. They are all selfish, greedy, or expansionist regimes that care only about galactic domination. The Flood would be a challenge for all life in the galaxy, and even beyond. So let's go through the factions of Warhammer and discern how they would react to the Flood. Now, as totally robotic entities, the Necrons seem like they'd be the opposite of the Flood's targets, right? But that's not true. Unlike demon possession, which can be negated by Necron pylons, the Flood can land on a tomb world, worming its tendrils and spores into the machinery and mechanical forms of the Necrons, overriding the warriors and turning them into zombified husks of their former self. And if the Flood are able to connect with more intelligent heads of Necron kind, it will assimilate and be able to use all that complex knowledge within the dynasties that have outlasted stars in the Milky Way galaxy. They would be able to learn about the pylons, the war in heaven, and everything else going on with Necron kind. While the Necrons are in a good spot with weapons that counteract the Flood quite well, they are still susceptible to infection and takeover, which can happen in a matter of days on a tomb world. If gone unchecked, the Flood will grow to inherit incredible technology and powers from the Necrons, turning the skeleton Terminators against themselves. Whether or not they can respond in time or organize enough of the scattered tomb worlds to counteract this force would depend on them. At the very least, it's one foe the Necrons could not even eliminate without constructing something that kills all biological life in the galaxy as the Halo rings did. But that would forever clear their chances of reversing the biotransference and curing their race from the prisons they have inhabited for eons. I'm going to lump all of these Xenos together because I think the output is much the same. Assimilation. The smaller Xenos factions, at least small on Warhammer scales, don't stand much of a chance in the way of the Flood. The Tau and their battlesuits would be dominated by the powerful Infection, using their massive cannons and aggressive sub-factions like the Kroot against them. The Votann are much the same. The Kin are somewhat more resilient up close, but the overwhelming numbers will be their downfall. And if the Gravemind is able to get its tendrils on the Votann themselves, the ancient computers of dwarven kind, that is a horror unlike any other for the squats. The Eldar may hold out with space magic bullcrap, but against the tides of force that is the Flood, they could ask for nothing more than to hide amongst the stars. And orcs, well, orcs are already fungus, so you'd have an even more lethal force, now controlled by a hive mind, able to use the incredible durability and hordes of the greenskins against any foe in the galaxy. Against the Great Devourer. Well, I think we're back to the Tyranid v Vex scenario, but with a unique twist. The Flood is much the same as Tyranid kind, an intelligent assimilator that will take the genetic information from any being across the universe and puppet it to be a part of its own designs. A hive mind that grows in strength and is relentless. One you cannot get rid of without literally atomizing it. Could the Tyranids out-evolve an Infection from the Flood? I don't know. But the main thing I will give to Halo's Eldritch Horror that triumphs the Tyranids is the connection of the Graveminds. With Tyranids, you can have whole splinter fleets separated from the Great Hive Mind, forming their own smaller hives that may come to clash with other Tyranids before returning to the main forces later on. With the Flood, each and every organism is connected to the Gravemind through all of space and time, unless the entire entity is destroyed. So while the Tyranids would evolve in response to a Flood attack, the Flood themselves would constantly be understanding and preparing to get ahead of the Tyranids, which I believe would gain them an upper hand. Effectively, the Flood win on the logistical battle against evolution with the Tyranids. Now, hive worlds are the perfect breeding ground for the Flood. Like with Gene Stealers, Tyranids, or chaotic cults, the Flood could land on a hive world in just a few spores and be amassing a brand new Gravemind overnight. Trillions upon trillions of humankind would fall to the Infection. As the situations grew dire, with the Flood forces taking over guardsmen, civilians, tanks, space travel, and more, things would escalate. And as Astartes came to handle the situation, this strange new Infection would be a violent wake-up call for humanity's pestilence. And the Flood would not even need to take over an Astartes from the inside out. If enough force is applied and a Space Marine is subdued, the Flood could even take command of their power armor with the Marines still inside. This is not a victory humanity could achieve. There is no removing this plague, and the longer it stays, the worse it gets. As they did against the Forerunners, the Flood could overtake entire companies of the Astartes chapters, fly their battle barges into friendly airspace, and continue the spread from there, completely covertly. While equipped to hold off battles of attrition, humanity's main strategy of throwing bodies at the meat grinder until it comes to a halt would not work to stop the Flood, and if anything would just make them even more of a dangerous fight to go against. Not the Astartes, the Mechanicus, the Custodes, or even the Golden Throne of Terra could hold off this great disease. And finally, the Ruinous Powers. Now, whether or not the Flood could affect the metaphysical is not quite clear, but they are Lovecraftian for a reason. We don't know how, we don't know why, but it was believed by even the Forerunners in Halo that the Flood could infect time and space. That one could inspect the stars in the night sky and they would seem off. This is the extra edge that stops all of Warhammer in its tracks. Because aside from chaos, all of the other horrors of Warhammer are uniquely grounded. But the Flood isn't just a disease, it's not just a biological nightmare, it is as unknowable and unmoving as gravity. We can observe its effects, but what causes it, what helps it to exist, is a question unto the stars themselves. Now, could the Flood infect the Warp? I think they could. Not in the traditional sense, but the Flood seemed to be able to control things in a way that should be unnatural, affecting the way slip space works and destroying the bonds of reality where they connect. The Flood, at the very least, would birth a fifth Chaos God, a ruinous, unstoppable god of bonds. Not of death, not of disease, but of the very forces that hold our reality together. In the same way, the Gravemind is connected in ways that should not be possible, and that they assimilate life in ways that are unnatural. The manifestation of the Flood would be the Bondmaker, the creator of pathways and the Great Bridge. Something that seeks to make everything one, seeking forever a mantle that can uphold life, seed new species, and create a universe that is connected and fruitful. But in the grimdark universe of the far future, that mantle will never come. Instead, the Flood will consume, assimilating all that comes towards it until they change, or the Milky Way is extinguished. But that is the end of our engagements for today. Let me know what you think down below and what factions or characters you want to see in the future. Check out the playlist link below or here in the corner for past videos on Ben 10, Destiny, Omni-Man, and so much more. With that, we're at the end. Thank you very much for watching. If you've liked this, be sure to subscribe, share, and like the video. If you want to support what I do here on YouTube, you can also become a member or a patron and get access to every single one of my videos up to a week early with some extra bonuses like being able to read my scripts and see some other behind the scenes content. And like always, if you want to support me in helping a good cause, pick up something from my merch collections down below. Whether it's a shirt, jacket, apron, or a mug, each and every dime from sales are being donated directly to my local food bank. So get yourself an awesome, super soft piece of clothing while doing good at the same time. As always, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.